Welcome to Daddy Issues. Conversations with Dads. A podcast from Fathers and Families Center of Indianapolis, Indiana. Hey, welcome in everyone. It is Daddy Issues. I'm Jason Acquisto, and with me is, as always, Larry Smith, the president and CEO of Fathers and Families Center of Indianapolis, Indiana. And we also are welcoming a special guest today to the podcast. This is our friend Edreece Redmond. Edreece, we have kids of various ages. It's a great mix. Larry has a grown daughter. He has grandkids. And then he has two teenagers. And I have one, and he is 20 years old. So it's different to have an only. It's a whole different environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what about your kids? What do you work with there?
So I am at the kind of stage a little bit kind of where Larry is, so I have three kids and they're at the 18, 22, 24 mark. So we literally had three kids graduate from some institution in May of 2024.
Isn't that awesome?
Wow.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah,
that is great.
My youngest daughter graduated from high school. My son graduated from undergraduate, and my oldest daughter graduated from a master's program.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
May of this year.
In May of this year. So
yeah, I mean, you're kind of like, all right.
Yeah. Listen, and we just got some awesome news today. So my son started his job last Monday. I told him he would never get another 2-month break, right, between graduation and actually starting his job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So good luck with that. But no, my oldest daughter actually just accepted a job with the Kentucky State Police. So
oh wow,
we're excited. She's going to be she's a forensic science major. And so she's going to be a forensic biologist with the Kentucky State Police Crime Lab.
No kidding. That is fascinating.
Yeah. CSI Kentucky.
There we go.
I mean, that's really cool. Forensic files. I love that.
And Jason's originally from Kentucky.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
I am. And my brother is in law enforcement in Kentucky in Oldham County.
Gotcha.
Very cool. So when did she start that job?
They pushed it to August 18th. So we're now trying, because she's still in Boston. And then, so right now we're looking for, the position is in Frankfurt. That's where their main crime lab is.
Yeah.
So she's looking either in Frankfurt, Georgetown, or Lexington for, apartments. And we've just started that process.
Yeah. Lexington's where it's at.
But yeah, I mean, I think if we go to the Lexington route, it's going to be like that northwest side, so she can hop right on 64 and head up to Frankfurt. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And my niece, who I just talked to today, is in Louisville. She just graduated from IU Law and is working for a firm down there, an IP firm. Okay. And cool. I'm sure she'd be helpful in any way she can.
That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
And then a guy I went to high school at the same time with. He was at Lawrence North. I was at Southport, but Derwin Webb. He went to, like I said, Lawrence North track and basketball, played for Denny Crum, won a national championship with Denny Crum, never left, right? So he's a judge in Louisville now.
Wait, what's his name?
Derwin Webb.
Oh, Derwin Webb. He was on a Crum championship team.
Yep.
That's great.
Yep.
So speaking of University of Louisville, my son goes to University of Louisville, and he'll be a rising junior. The glory is about to return to University of Louisville basketball. Okay.
All righty.
It was a couple of years in limbo, but it's going to be good with new coach and everything. So,
who was that new coach they brought over?
It's Pat Kelsey.
Pat Kelsey, yes.
Yeah.
And also speaking of basketball, Edreece's son just graduated from Wabash, played basketball at Wabash.
Oh, very cool.
He was part of the Little Giants, their Final Four run a couple years ago, and it was awesome experience for him.
Edreece, we start with dad jokes. I don't know where you fall on that spectrum. You can feel free to contribute, but we've got plenty. We're going to throw out a couple here. So I don't know how you are with home ownership. There's always something going on with the house, and it's like, I was in the upstairs bathroom the other day, and wouldn't you know it, I found something in the toilet. It was actually turned out to be a shoe, and I'm like, what? Wait, that's a shoe. It's a wooden shoe. It was a clog.
Oh well. I started to go to work. This is a wonderful thing. I now get paid to go to work and go to sleep. It's my dream job.
Hey,
I
okay,
can't top those, fellas. I'm sorry. I have nothing for you. I'll
I
be
do have a
prepared
sweet
next
tooth.
time, maybe.
I mean, I do have a sweet tooth. I just had dinner, and I always like a little sweet tooth afterwards. And my wife's always teasing me about, oh, you got to have candy. She doesn't know. I got a few Twix up my sleeve.
Boom.
I
Boom.
know. Yeah, okay, so um, it's
Oh,
great to
wow.
be a dad. I
It
mean,
It
it's
is.
the best, right? So I've been a dad for 20, almost 21 years. And it is the hardest job. It's the best job. And we don't get paid nearly enough. But then sometimes stuff happens and you're like, wow, I just got paid. The satisfaction, the pride.
Absolutely.
So today on Daddy Issues, thought we'd talk about the talk. It is the talk that I'm going to assume you've had with your kids, being that they're grown.
Oh.
Um, Larry, I think you might be a little more recent. Yeah. What is it about this that makes us so nervous to talk to our kids about sex?
Because we've been their ages.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and me being a dad, as you well know, just before I turned 17, and it's you want to see them go in the right direction, be responsible at the same time. I remember very well hormones raging and all of that, and it was interesting to be on these bookends now because my oldest 37. I basically set her down, and she knew, the whole story about how she got here and all that. And we had this talk when she was in middle school, and there was an event that happened. She had written this letter that was pretty explicit. She thought it was going to be between just her and her girlfriend, where her mom got wind of it
Wait,
and
how
made
old
her
is she at
read it
this
to
point?
me. Yeah.
How old is she at this point?
So what is that? What is that? 14, 13, 14?
Okay.
And so we had a very real talk. And I said, I understand, et cetera, et cetera. I said, but um, you need to understand that if you make an adult decision, and by an adult decision, I mean, obviously having sex, get pregnant. To me, you're saying you want to be an adult, which is fine, but then you can't be in my house if you want to be an adult. So you have to go be an adult. And I said, you can call me a hypocrite or whatever the case may be, but I know what I have gone through. And I said, on the flip side, I said, but when you do think that you are ready to start having sex, come to me. This is going to be a painful discussion, but come to me and let me know, and we'll make sure we get protection. I said, this is not me condoning. I said, but I'm realistic, and she, sure enough, she did.
What?
Whereas yes, she did. She absolutely did in high school.
Because I wouldn't have. If
Yeah,
that was you, I would have been like, are you kidding me?
yeah,
Because you're
yep.
at how old at this point? You're like 30.
Yeah, I was very, very young,
Yeah.
but she, to her credit, came. Whereas my son just turned 17, and I've had the discussion with him, not in as much detail and all of that, but I've just basically said to him, "Look, you." Or why I ask him the question, he says, "No, I'm not. Being active and so on." I said, "Well, make sure you tell me when you think you're ready." I said, "Understand that if I had it to do over again," and I told him I'm serious about this, I would have waited. I would have, waited at a minimum until I was older, but certainly in my own mind, it would have been until I was married. I, wanted to do it God's way and so on. So we've had a very, very, brief, twice, but a very, very honest talk. And he still says he's not ready, and he's got a girlfriend, and but he's not ready, and so that works for
Mhm.
me.
So you
Interesting.
seem supremely confident though, because you're like, listen, just come to me. And she did, and you had no problem with that.
It was tough. I still remember to this day how I felt in saying that to her. But I just felt, ultimately that it was the right thing to do.
Sure.
For her own protection. When we talked about the pill and condoms and all these other things, and the pill is not going to keep STDs, as we call them now, I guess STIs today, but STDs, and all that. So we had a very, very in-depth talk.
So, Edreece, you have how many girls and how many boys?
Yeah, so it's two girls, bookending the boy in the middle. So,
Okay.
it was, what's interesting is that I can't pinpoint a time where it was, okay, this is the time to have the talk, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, it's been a ongoing conversation about important issues and making sure you're kind of creating an environment where they're comfortable coming to you
Mm.
talking about things, and right, and so the conversation has come up in kind of random settings of something that they saw when they were younger, or something that's going, or that they heard or read about. And so it's having discussions kind of about, okay, you saw this on television, right? And this is what it was, right?
Yeah.
What questions do you have about it, like, to understand where their thought process, what they're already thinking, and then to try to make sure they have the factual information, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I did notice is, and Larry, maybe you've had this, the conversation with my son seemed a little different than the conversation with my daughters. And what I mean by is, for me, I seem to have more comfort in having those conversations with my son than I did with my daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I got you.
And I think that, and again, it's the connection there, obviously, is probably one of those reasons, but
Mhm.
it's also, it's my daughters. Like,
Yeah.
we don't want to think about
Yeah.
those things, but they're real. And
Yeah.
so, but I think it's also important because we had my young daughter, or my oldest daughter, when we were young, our senior year in college. And so, we had to, eventually have that discussion, especially as, and what I found important was, um, establishing what our values are in regards to sex, relationships, how you handle yourself, right? And then, of
Right.
course, you start thinking, well, mom and dad, you didn't follow those rules, right?
Right.
So why are you asking me to do as you say, not as you did, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole different episode right
It's a whole,
there.
Oh
right.
yeah.
It's a whole different episode, right? But so in this context, right, it was one of those things where we had to explain, there are reasons for sex, and there's designed reasons for sex, and sometimes people step out of that design, and there are consequences to that, right? And so you have the consequences discussion.
Mhm.
Um, but again, I think it's more important, like, with me and my son, it's, maybe a trip to, I know we would have it in between sometime basketball games, right? Where, he's at a game, we got a ride home from an AAU tournament, and I know he's texting girls and things like that, and conversations come up, and we have discussions about,
Mm.
implications of your decisions.
Yeah.
Your body's changing now, and there are certain actions that take place that have consequences to them. And so you have to
Yeah.
be prepared if you're going to, engage in adult behavior, which is designed for, then, again, there's adult consequences to that. And so,
But
that's,
yeah, no, it
it's a
seems
tough one. It's uneasy, but it's
yeah.
one that you have to have.
But I think it's great that you didn't sit down and have the big, okay, now sit down and we're gonna have the talk and like all of this big buildup.
Hmm.
You kind of weaved it into like real life things that just oh so what's that your song on the radio, what's that song, oh what do you think, or some kid you know called somebody a sexual slur, and you're like what do you think that is, or just those little times where you can kind of catch them in their natural state and not with like any barriers up, because if you tell them you need to talk and you got to come in the bedroom and close the door and sit down. That's not a good setting.
It kind of
Yeah,
takes
and
that
for
awkwardness
me,
away from it.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Edreece. I didn't mean
I
to
was
cut
just
you
gonna say it takes some of that awkwardness away from it.
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Daddy Issues. We'll be right back.
Temp check. What kind of summer are we having this year? A family road trip summer? A beach bum summer? Or a wake me up when the sun sets summer? With Instacart, choose your own adventure and skip the shopping side quests. Where available, you can get ice cream delivered to your hotel, sunscreen to the pool, or cold brew to your bed. Well, door, in as fast as 30 minutes. Wherever you find yourself this summer, you can get the goods. Download Instacart for free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Excludes restaurants. Additional terms and fees apply.
They say opposites attract. That's why the Sleep Number Smart Bed is the best bed for couples. You can each choose what's right for you, whenever you like. You like a bed that feels firm, but they want soft? Sleep Number does that. You want to sleep cooler, while they like to feel warm. Sleep Number does that too. Sleep Number Smart Beds also learn how you sleep and provide you with personalized insights to help you sleep even better. You have to feel it to believe it. Find the bed that's for both of you, only at a Sleep Number store. 9 out of 10 couples say they sleep better on a Sleep Number Smart Bed. Time to catch some Z's. J.D. Power ranks Sleep Number number 1 in customer satisfaction with mattresses purchased in-store. And now during Sleep Number's biggest sale of the year, save 50% on the Sleep Number Limited Edition Smart Bed, plus special financing for a limited time. For J.D. Power 2023 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Only at a Sleep Number store or sleepnumber.com. See store for details.
And now back to Daddy Issues.
And what I said to my oldest daughter is, I'm going to give you the benefit of the talk that I never had. Right? I mean,
Yeah. I didn't have it. Nobody gave it to me. Did you guys get a talk? I didn't.
I did not. And and then it's interesting. To Edreece's point about sons versus daughters. First of all, with my oldest, I was not at all prepared. I was kind of thrust into it because of this letter that her mother intercepted. Like, okay, well, let's just jump in with my son. I had a bit more comfort, although a lot less detail and all that. Because the kids obviously got social media and their friends and all that. They're hopefully they're getting some good information. Of course, we go through things in church and all that. But my daughter, the middle one, who's 19 now, we never have. I left that to her mom. She would. I don't feel that it would have been well received for me. So I didn't. She's very, very strong personality. And yeah, I could be wrong, but just based on any number of other conversations we've had, I didn't think it would go well.
So are parents of the same gender supposed to give, or are you supposed to give the talk to boys? And if there's a mother in the picture, she gives it to the girl. I mean, is that the way it's supposed to be?
It's interesting you said that, Larry, that because I was actually talking to my wife a little bit about this, and I think naturally, right, there's some connection there between mothers and daughters and fathers and sons that leads its way to discussions that with between each of them than it would be between me and my daughters, right? So I think I think it's the continuation of that dialogue that, as long as, and that's important that we're on the same page as well, mom and dad, right? When we're having this conversation.
Right.
Because that's a, that can cause a huge issue. Well, mom said this about, how I should handle this situation.
You told him what? You told him what?
Exactly. So, there are, and I agree. I never got to talk, right? So this is literally learned behavior from.
Yeah. So I'm like, how do I think I learned the facts? And I have no idea.
What about you, Jason? How did it go with you and your son?
With the talk? Well, so I had my talk with him. I had a captive audience. He's like 9 or 10 and he's in a shower. And I came in and he's not going anywhere. Okay. But he also didn't have to so we're not like face to face. So no weird eye contact. So he actually had a habit when he was younger that he'd be like, hey, come and talk to me while I'm in the shower. And he's a kid and like, he didn't have any issues. There were no boundaries with at that age, right? So I'm like, okay, cool. So we talk about sports, obviously, most of the time. But like that night, I said, "Hey, listen, I want to have a talk with you. That's something that dads have with their sons, and I want to just tell you, kind of how it is that." And I used the words and I used the clinical terms, and you know, it didn't make me embarrassed because I'm talking to a shower curtain, right? And I think it went okay because I'm like, I want to make sure you understand, and sounds kind of weird, right? But you have any questions? Did you know all this, or do you have any? He's like, no, I kind of thought some of that, but no, I get it. Anyway, what time the Cardinals on? So, like, I mean, so I kind of got off the hook for myself in terms of I gave him the talk, but I thought it was pretty clever to do it that way. But also, you can't just check that box and say, well, we had the talk, because, like Edreece said, it's really more about then kind of being in touch and being in tune with what's going on in his world. So he was in junior high at that time, and we had other much smaller talks along the way about, you know, uh, what's going on with your buddies and their girlfriends and different things. And then when he got to be a little bit older and started dating and preparing to go to college, I said, listen, I'd recommend this behavior, but you're old enough to make your own choices. And so if you choose this behavior, then here you go. I'm gonna give you protection and to make sure that you're never not prepared. And of course, you're like, I'm not saying you should go out. This is not a license to go out and have sex, because that's not what it's about. And so we had kind of a bookend to that original conversation from a decade before. Yeah, I think we got to be on the same page with that, and also did a pretty decent job, I think, of saying, this is what you should do. I want you to be better and prepared than I was.
Well, and it's funny, and this wasn't sex per se, but my grandmother, God rest her soul, was freaked out. So with my oldest daughter, I just made the decision that we were going to call a thing, right? So I told her, this is vagina, this is penis. My grandmother's like, no, this is your tutu, and this is your pee, right? It's like
Right.
she was just freaked out,
Yeah,
that I would tell. I was like, no, man, all she needs to know.
yeah.
These are what we call these body parts. But yeah, I'm not sure she had forgiven me by the time she passed away. But
Well, I mean, that's hard. That's a hard one, bro.
And you
Because
bring
that's
up
my granddaughter.
an interesting point, because I also think of something, especially in regards to my girls that came to mind, is that as girls mature, right? Doctors nowadays, right? One of the ways that you can help alleviate the length of, your cycles, right, is they will give them
birth
birth
control.
control pills.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. And so I remember having this conversation with my wife, and then also with our daughters, because, that was a situation of, hey, you're getting these for this, but also understand that this is what they are. Right.
Right.
And so that was, when you just mentioned your conversation, Jason, around, around condoms and things like that, I'm like, same thing happened inadvertently, but again, it's having that communication to talk about, okay, your doctor's saying, because this is bad, we're going to put you on birth control pills. Here's what this means. Right.
Yeah, but there's a whole different baggage, or there's a lot more that goes with the talk and sexual awareness between young women and young men, because obviously we know the culture, not just the culture, but the understanding of consent, okay, and of a body autonomy, and of boundaries of all kinds, and how to teach our sons to be proper young men and to have respect for women's bodies. That's a whole different podcast right there. So like that coming into it, it has to be a whole different talk with a son than it is a daughter, because I mean, I can't imagine the complication. Then of course, I think that if you have a daughter, you're also probably given a little bit more grace, that's kind of built in because, hey, man, you need that. My wife would say that she's glad we only have a son because teenage daughters are too much drama.
Yeah.
But it's important to raise a young woman in today's world with all of the things that she faces. Um, Little nuanced issues like the one you talked about, but then it's about birth control. But the whole thing about consent and safety, and then it drifts into other issues such as reproductive rights, and that's a conversation that it gets a lot bigger, right? Um, the whole sexual identity of young people is not what it used to be. It's not what it was when we were growing up in last century.
Yeah,
I
it's
think that's
very
why
complicated.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's important to, and again, I think, I'm just a tad bit younger than you guys. I'm assuming a tad bit, not much, but a
Just a
tad
little.
bit, right? But
Yeah.
even still, right? It's to me, sex as a discussion was so kind of tabooish, right? And that's why we never got to talk. You have to figure it out on your own. And I agree with you, Jason, that you have to nowadays, with the exposure that young ladies have and young men have, um, they have to understand, one, their power, right, that they have over their bodies to control certain things, but also to understand that how you interact, how you present yourself. And again, these are whole other discussions, but it does go back to, that's part of this conversation of
Yeah.
sexuality in general, right?
Yeah.
You have to, son, this is, I can always use the card, right, of, son, how would you want, your sisters or your mom to be treated?
Absolutely.
Right. And
Yeah.
we're having this conversation about, like, is that, would you want someone to treat your, your sisters like that? And I like being able to pull that card from time to time.
That's a pretty good
No,
card.
that's awesome. And then with my son, like as I said, he has a girlfriend. She's white, which is fine with me. That's no issue at all. But even though times have changed somewhat, we've had that discussion as well. Not everybody is accepting of this, and the reason that I raise that, in the context of sex is. You need to make sure that you're very careful as an young African American male, right? And so this is back to your point, Jason, about consent and how important consent is. Even obviously, if she were black or Asian or whatever the case may
Right.
be, but there's that history, and I want him to understand. It's always which is kind of one of the other talks. How much do I say about this, and how race fits into all of that. But in any case, there are other complicating factors.
So true. So true.
Getting the smile and confidence you've been dreaming about, all from the comfort of your home, isn't a total mystery with Bite Clear Aligners. Just don't be surprised if all your friends start asking, what's your secret? Begin by ordering your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95. Bite Clear Aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces, plus they offer flexible financing, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Have you ever covered a carpet stain with a rug? Ignored a leaky faucet? Pretended your half-painted living room is supposed to look like that? Well, you're not alone. We've all got unfinished home projects. But there's an easier way. Thumbtack is the app that makes it easier to care for your home. Pull out your phone and in just a few taps, search, chat, and book highly rated pros right in your neighborhood. Download Thumbtack and start caring for your home the easier way.
This is Daddy Issues. We'll be right back after this short break. This is Daddy Issues. It's a podcast from Fathers and Family Center of Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm Jason Acquisto, and Larry Smith is the president and CEO of Fathers and Families. Our guest this episode is Edreece Redmond. Now, Edreece, what is it you do for a living?
So I'm the executive director for a nonprofit here in the city of Indianapolis that provides operational and business supports to charter schools here locally.
Oh, super. That's pretty cool.
And actually, Edreece, there's a program from the United Way of Central Indiana called Leadership United. And so Edreece has been actually sitting in on our board meetings recently as a way to kind of understand how we do things and how he might apply some of those lessons to his board and so on. We've also had the benefit of his experience as well.
I think it's pretty cool to be able to sit and talk with other dads. This was the whole vision. It's going to be unstructured and just topical. So we do have, I think the first few times we had industry experts or subject matter, and those were really valuable. But I think this is really even valuable in a different way because we get to just talk with regular dudes about what was it like for you? What do you think about this? What was it like with a daughter? So yeah, so I got that clinical part out with my son when he was younger and said all the penis and vagina talk, right? But then it's like you said, Edreece, you go on through life and you kind of create this whole ongoing dialogue of topics that are part of the sex talk, because it's not really about the sex. It's not really about the sexual intercourse talk, but it's about all the things that we know now relate to sex, whether it be racial implications, because that is a racial implication with an African-American young man and a Caucasian woman.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I will, again, transparency, and I'm pretty sure we've all been through this, but right, you have to prepare your kids, right? As fathers, we have an obligation to prepare our kids for the world they are going to enter, right? They are going to be a part of, right? We all have this utopia that we would love to live in, but then there's the reality of it, right? And so if you're not, as fathers, having this discussion with your kids, right, I would say, are you preparing your kids to be the best decision makers they can be around these subjects, right? Because that's what this comes down to me. In the big picture, this is about decision making, right? You have this now power, of ability to, you have this thing called, sex, and that you can utilize. And it's about decision making and making the right decisions to handle it, right, in the right and proper way. And so I think that's the broader discussion. What situations you do put yourself in, what situations, you make sure you're pulling yourself out of. When you get into certain situations, who do you call? How do I get help in these situations? But that has to, right, I think, again, that comes from a dialogue and not just kind of a one-time discussion, right? I think that's important. And I think what we've learned over time is also that scare tactics work a little bit, but they don't have the impact that I think people used to think they have. I think what it does, scare tactics tend to close the door. And when when we're talking about this subject, we need that door wide open, right? So we can clear up misinformation. We can make sure they have facts. We talked about calling body parts the right thing, but that's important, right? That's important for young kids and adult or young adults to know as they grow up. So, I think we hit it on the head in regards to, like, this is an ongoing conversation that leads to more robust discussions about the world in general, and how we make better decision makers, make our kids better decision makers.
You're listening to Daddy Issues. We'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by eHarmony, the dating app to find someone you can be yourself with. Why doesn't eHarmony allow copy and paste in first messages? Because you are unique, and your conversations should reflect that. eHarmony wants you to find someone who will get you. How are you going to know who gets you if people send you the same generic conversation starters they message everyone else? Conversations that actually help you get to know each other. Imagine that. Get who gets you on eHarmony. Sign up today.
What makes a life a good one? Is it the adventure you have? Or the friends you find along the way? Maybe it's pursuing your passion while striving to protect, defend, and save what you believe in every single day. So what makes a life a good one? In the Coast Guard, we think it's all of the above and more. But you'll have to find out for yourself. Visit gocoastguard.com to learn more.
And now back to the show.
And your point about consequences. Obviously, most people would. I'm assuming most people's minds would go automatically, to pregnancy and STIs and all that. But one of the aspects that I try to focus on with my kids are not obviously, there's the physical, but there's the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects as well, right? And so one of the reasons I said, that I told my oldest, well, actually, both of the kids I had the conversation with is, I wasn't mentally or emotionally ready. I thought, and it never even occurred to me that I needed to be, emotionally or mentally ready for it. I was, 16 and just ready to go, physically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's important. And I don't know how common it is for parents to include, those other components in that discussion, but I think it's crucial.
Yeah, so I was watching, this is random, but it applies. I'm watching that movie Say Anything. It's one of those that just if it's on, you'll give it a few minutes. It's a classic from the 80s, right? And I watched it for a few minutes, and it's that part where John Cusack character comes in and says, he tells his friends who are two girls, he said, "Yeah, well, I had sex with my girlfriend." And he said, "No, it doesn't change anything." And she said, "No, Lloyd, listen to me." And she gets super dramatic. It changed everything. Everything's different. You might be 60 years old walking down the street and you haven't seen her in 40 years. But if you run into her, the first thing you think is, we had sex. And it's true because it might not result in pregnancy or some kind of physical result like an STD, but emotionally and mentally, it does affect you. And if it's your first time, then it changes you forever. This is not a scare tactic, but it's like, yeah, I think back, yeah, I'm different than before, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, yeah, shout out to Say Anything, right?
Good movie.
I also found that in talking about that ongoing dialogue and that trust, building that trust, Edreece, you mentioned this as the ongoing thing. I feel like that was early on in showing vulnerability in front of my son. One of the things I want him to always remember or look back and think about me, I hope he does, is that my father was always willing to be uncomfortable for my own benefit, right? And to have hard conversations or to show vulnerability. I'm glad that he's seen me cry before or to show weakness or to make mistakes and own those mistakes. Those kinds of humanizing are things that we didn't get necessarily out of our fathers and generations before. So showing that vulnerability of like, listen, son, this is hard for me. This is a weird conversation. I think that's one small piece that it helped me with too. And maybe that's something that other dads can relate to.
No, yeah, I agree with you, right? It does, it brings a connection that says, okay, dad is human. Dad makes mistakes. Dad has feelings, right? It's not always dad giving me or telling me what to do, but that ongoing dialogue, and I use the right word, right? It's showing, it's being vulnerable. It's showing that it's okay for men, right? Because we get this all the time. I tell this story quite a bit. But when I was 10, I lost my father, right? I lost my father when I was 10 years old. And I remember being in my father's funeral and an uncle of mine literally telling me as a 10-year-old, men don't cry.
Wow.
Right. And this is my dad. I'm sitting there, and that stuck with me for years. And when I had my son, right, and my daughters too, but specifically my son, I'm like, I don't want to be that person, right? It's okay for men to show vulnerability, it's for emotions and feelings, because it brings, there's a trust that's built there that I can go to dad, right? I can go to mom. And even though the situation may not be ideal, I trust them. He's opened up to me. He's going to be vulnerable for me, and so we can have this discussion because at the end of the day, he knows I have his best interests in mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I literally, before the podcast, I just left a situation where I was talking with young people, part of a group of adults, and we're talking about exactly that. One of the things I brought up that we teach at Fathers and Families is about the importance of men being able to emote. And I even brought out the one of my favorite quotations of all time from Frederick Douglass, who said that it is easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. Right. So from the time that they are young, teach them. And I would argue, part of that strength is telling boys that it's okay to cry, that there's nothing wrong with men crying. And we at our organization deal with the after effects of many things, including the fact that I don't know. Again, no empirical data, but at least 40 to 50% of the men who we work with were told exactly that: men don't cry, and just having no idea how damaging that is to us.
Yeah, that imprinted on you, and you had to do work to undo that, because I bet even as growing up, you knew that can't be right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, because I think you see firsthand, right? And I was able to witness firsthand when men don't show emotion, and crying being one of those, right? That means you're bottling that up, and it's gonna rear its ugly head somewhere,
Some way.
right? In some way, and that can be, and a lot of times that's not in a positive manner, right? And so I think, and again, that's why I wanted to stress to my son and men I come across and talk to, that it's okay to have emotions. You're human. You're going to have them. It's better for you to show those emotions in a way that you can handle them, in a way that you can manage them, versus you not handling them in the right way. You do something that you may not intend, but you've had all this built up emotions in you, and now there's a whole another set of consequences you got to deal with.
And even
Balance.
using sex as a substitute for love and affection, and being able to cope with things of life. And that's a talk that I have with a lot of men, boys and men. It's not a substitute for those things, and so we need to you understand what is actual intimacy. And obviously, sex is a part of intimacy, but it's not the only part, right? And how can you be closer to your partner with and without sex? And so what is the appropriate role for sex, and what it does, and what does it not do that we sometimes expect it to do? So all those emotional maturity types of issues are important to address.
That's a great point, because the more young men are taught or imprinted that don't show emotion, they still have that need for intimacy. So the act of sex stands in for true intimacy, and so it doesn't symbolize intimacy or express intimacy. It becomes the only way they know how to even be close to somebody else, because they wall off their emotions. So yeah, you've got to undo that, huh? So that's an ongoing part of the program that you guys work with at Fathers and Families, and that's a big piece of it, I imagine.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, let me say this, because Edreece doesn't know this. It's funny. Jason and I actually began to have a conversation about having a podcast before I ever went to Fathers and Families.
Oh, that's right.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was in
Before
2020 when the world was on fire, and
Interesting.
we were reconnecting on social media, and so just a lot of stuff we found a lot of connection with, and we're like, we'd be good in a conversation coming from two different perspectives: white guy, black guy, and at that time in the world, it felt right. But then it got paused, and we later recircled back and said, "Hold on, it's really about being a father."
And it's important, right? I commend you both for creating this platform to do this, right? Because a lot of times, us as men, we won't say it, but we think we're out there alone, right? We think we're the only one going through something. And when you have an opportunity and resources and platforms like this to be able to, tap into to say, okay, man, Jason, man, I walked in on my, my son in the shower. That's a good time to maybe have that conversation.
That's a good
Right?
time.
Well, you just never, you pick up little hints and tidbits as you grow as parents, right? There's no handbook to how to be the perfect father or anything, right? So you pick it up from other men, right, in this situation. And so I commend you both for putting something like this together.
Well, it's also great because there's no pressure. I think what we both realize is that there is no handbook, like you said. So we don't feel obligated to deliver answers or solutions. When we have experts come in, we want to benefit from their wisdom, but they're also not going to do that. When we had mental health experts come in, there's a lot of gray in the world, and there's really just encouragement. We're coming alongside and saying, us too, we feel the same way. So you're not alone. And there's power in that.
Yeah, and we say that over and over again at Fathers and Families Center. Men, the majority of the men who we work with have experienced trauma in one or more than one form, and to be in that community, it's amazing to me that our Strong Fathers cohort is only 3 weeks long, but in that period, without fail, these men form a true bond, and a lot of it has to do with what you were saying, Edreece, about I felt that I was alone. No one else is going through this. No one else has had these kinds of experiences, or in my friends circle or in my family, I'm not comfortable because I know that some of them have also gone through it, but I'm not comfortable. But here I am in a room full of strangers on day one, and invariably even by the end of week one, they've begun to form these bonds, and they know that they are not alone. And I think that is just a human need, right? To know that I am not alone in what I've experienced in the past, what I'm going through right now, how I think my life is going to turn out. And so when you have that sense of community, especially of men who have had similar experiences, that is so powerful, very powerful.
Yeah, it sure is. Just being together and just realizing that we're all in this for the same reasons. We all have the best of intentions. And if we can pick up a little juice from somebody else, that's kind of empowering. So as far as what we solved today, nothing. We just came together and talked about it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I would say, though, that there's some practical help because, man, just get in there and relate to your kids. Just be vulnerable, right?
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take
at the end of the day, kids just want to know that they are loved. They know that we're fallible. They know that we're, once they turn 6, they know we're not, they know it all anymore. So, but the thing I think that they really, really cling to, and this has been, confirmed by my eldest, I was, again, 37 now, is that Dad, you weren't perfect, but I knew that you care. I knew that you loved me.
Right.
And that's the crucial thing, right? They just need to know that you love them.
It's it. Yeah.
They need to. You're exactly right. And this is, not just with your kids, but even been in the education space for the last 10 years. Kids pick up on if you're genuine, if you truly have their interest in mind, right? And so if you can make that connection, I think you can have any discussion and conversation with your kids, right, as fathers, or with other young adults and young kids out there, as long as they know you're genuine and you're being true, and they're not going to be judged for having conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if all else fails, make their mother give them the talk.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Throw mom under the bus.
Appreciate it.
Great to meet you. Larry, as always, great stuff. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, man. Always.
Okay. Thanks for listening to Daddy Issues. Be sure to connect with us on social media. Feel free to email us, dads@thedaddyissuespodcast.com. Daddy Issues is a podcast from the Fathers and Family Center of Indianapolis, Indiana. To learn more about the programs of Fathers and Family Center, visit fathersandfamilycenter.org.